if you're a baseball fan from the Midwest, there's a really good chance that you're a Cubs fan. And if you're not a Cubs fan, then you at least should have respect for the historic park where they play. Wrigley Field's been home to the Cubs for over a century, and it's seen a lot of historic baseball moments. My first game was at Wrigley Field, my first MLB game that I ever went to, so that's very special to me. It's a special place for any baseball fan at their first game. But Wrigley Field hasn't always just hosted baseball, it's also hosted football, soccer, and hockey games as well. But before we talk about all the events it's hosted, let's just talk about the history of the name. It started out being built as Weigman Park in 1916, and it was founded by Charles Weigman for his team in the Federal Baseball League, but that team went bankrupt 2 years later, and then it was bought by the Chicago Cubs, and it was renamed Cubs Park in 1920, after the Cubs had been playing there for a couple years. And then in 1926, then Cubs owner William Wrigley Jr. renamed it Wrigley Field after himself, and he made his money in the chewing gum industry. Wrigley Chewing Gum, that's where he got his money. It was built in 2 months in 1914, and it cost $250,000 to build. And Zachary Taylor Davis was the architect, and he was also the architect for Comiskey Field on the south side of Chicago for the White Sox. So he designed both stadiums in the city. It originally held 14,000 people and had just a single deck of grandstands and not very much seating in the outfield. But since then it's been renovated, and it added another level of grandstands and a lot more seating in the outfield, and it holds now about 42,000 people. It's 355 feet to left field, 400 to center, and 353 feet to right field. So it's a pretty fair-sized baseball stadium, but when football was played there, it was actually a little small, and the Bears played there for many years, and the field actually was too small for the dimensions of a regular NFL football field, so one corner of the end zone was cut off, and the end of the end zone literally ended in the visitor's dugout. So there were special rules to make sure no one was injured, and the dugout was filled with pads in case anyone were to run off the edge. The outfield walls are actually covered in ivy, and it's a special kind of ivy that stays good in the winter. It's called Boston ivy, so it doesn't die in the winter. General Manager Billy Veeck planted the ivy, and it was part of a stadium beautification project. It's the only major league field with ivy-covered walls. And on top of the ivy walls is called the basket, and it's a net that keeps fans from falling onto the field of play, and it keeps home run balls into the crowd so that there can be no fan interference or anything. Above the ivy covered walls is Wrigley's signature scoreboard, and it's a 27 feet tall by 75 foot wide scoreboard that's hand turned by operators from the inside. And not only do they do numbers for the Cubs game, but they also have 6 columns on each side that show games from all over Major League Baseball for that day. And the number turners sit in the scoreboard itself and watch a computer, and as the scores change, they update them right away. No home run ball has ever hit the scoreboard, despite it being only about 20 feet behind the center field wall, which is interesting for how big it is. And even though no one's ever hit the scoreboard, a lot of people hit the apartment buildings across the street, such as Sammy Sosa and Dave Kingman. And the interesting thing about those buildings is that they have bleachers on top. And whenever that happens anywhere else in America with baseball fields, the owners discourage it and make sure that fans can't see them without paying. But Wrigley Field actually encouraged it and allowed the apartment buildings to not only look in, but build bleachers on top until they started charging admission, and then they agreed upon a profit set up so that the Cubs could get some of the money too, and then they've allowed it ever since, and it's become a regular part of Wrigley Field attendance. And with fans being allowed to see in, and it kind of creates an old-fashioned local feel, and Wrigley Field's kind of one of the most old-fashioned parks. It always has organ music playing. The seating's been pretty much unchanged since the 40s when the renovations were made. And it didn't even get lights until 1988 because fans thought it would ruin the traditional feel of Wrigley Field. And at every game after they win, it plays the same song, Go Cubs Go. So Wrigley Field it has very long and interesting history. It's hosted the Cubs for more than a century, and it's hosted many sports along with the Bears. And the interesting thing is that it's actually hosted more NFL games than any other stadium in the country. And a lot of people know it for baseball, but it's actually held more football games. It's got some of the most notable features of any park that you could spot from anywhere in any picture. And the traditions of Wrigley Field are what keeps it unique and a fun place to watch a baseball game.